I'm Mary Davidson, and it's our community. There's such wonderful people that live in our community that we get to meet. And I'd like for you to meet my friend, Mary Wessel. Hello, Mary.
Hey, Mary. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you, too. Mary is a professor of art, and her specialty is photography. And she does her creative thing here at Johnson County Community College. Now, the interesting part about Mary is that she has a one-woman show at the Nerman, and she has had lots of shows. She's the recipient of the, is it the Charlotte Street Award?
Yes, it is.
1997 you got that. So you've been at this a while.
I've been at this a little while.
Yes. And you know, that makes it good because you've had a lot of chance to practice.
That's right.
The interesting thing about the art show that you have at the Nerman is that it's called Worldscapes. And I think that's really an interesting title, but they're photograms. What is a photogram? I know what a telegram is.
That's right. Photogram is one of those unique photo terms, of course. There's lots of technology and lots of terms, but what it means is that it is not a lens-based picture. So when we think of photography, we normally think of the click of a shutter and that we're taking a picture through a camera and a lens. But really, photography is much broader than that. We can think of it as an imaging technology that uses light and light-sensitive materials. And in that definition, there's no reference to a camera. So
do you use a camera?
I do in other work, but not this particular
in this.
work. Yes, in a photogram, it's really as old as the medium itself.
Really?
And typically it involves...
Which would be about how?
Oh, 1839. But it typically involves placing objects on photographic paper, exposing that paper to light, and then processing it through photographic chemistry. And I've updated this process a little bit in the show Worldscapes, as have a number of contemporary artists. It's kind of a fascinating process because it is, I think of it as alchemy. A little bit of chemistry in the dark room.
Why didn't you wear your Merlin's hat?
That's right. You can't reveal too many secrets
here. You look rather
here.
normal for an alchemist.
Well, you have to have that special red light in the dark room.
Well, what you use are enlargers and color filters and household items. I mean, you have truly a chemist's array of items.
Of materials, yeah.
That you use. Well, what do you do with what household items do you use?
Well, let's start off with what the process is. I'm using color photographic
paper. Because I am in the dark, I must tell you. The dark room.
No puns, no puns.
Room, yeah.
I work with color photographic paper, and I use various liquids and chemistry. So I can use something as common as baking soda to create an eruption on my photographic paper. Flashlights, other light sources besides the enlarger. And then I expose what I'm doing. You have to think of it like painting in a way. I'm using wadded up paper towels instead of brushes, various liquids, little household items, individual lights. But then I expose it to the light from the enlarger because I can control the cyan, yellow, and magenta dials. So I can kind of control some of the colors. And then I process the whole thing in standard chemistry.
So let me just, the color is artificially enhanced?
It can be, yes. The color is both in the enlarger and in the paper.
I see.
And then I process it through standard photographic chemistry, and voila, we have an image.
So you develop the photographic paper?
Yes, in standard chemistry, just the way you would a normal picture.
Well, it seems to me now, as a non-practitioner looking at it, that you never know what you're getting.
Well, it does involve the kind of these twin elements of spontaneity, chance, but also you learn from what you're doing. So if I do something and see a result, I can know that the next time. So it's a constant back and forth, a constant adaptation. Well, you might think of it kind of like an athlete who kind of, you get a sense for something.
I know that you have some images that we can show the folks out there, and they're all different colors.
Yes.
One of them is green, bright green. It's beautiful. What did you use to get that color?
Well, that's the colors in the paper, and so it's really the reaction of whatever materials that I was using at the time.
I see.
And it does change per day.
And it looks to me like an undersea.
Yes.
I feel like I'm being psychoanalyzed.
Like your Jacques Cousteau.
That's right, my Rorschach test. But it looks like seaweed or something like that. Now, when you started this image, did you want green?
No, usually what I do is I do a certain number of tests on just test paper, just to kind of get a range of color to see what I'm working with that particular day with those particular materials.
Well,
And then I do drawings and I test things out, and then I come up with something that I like. So there's a vast amount of editing that goes on.
And you call them imaginary realities.
Well, they are, I think, they can be, you kind of think they can be real. So they look like they could be depictions of undersea life, but they also look fantastical as if they're not real at all. And I think that plays off of photography in general. But photographs tell the truth and they lie.
Well,
so they do both.
Well, they do, and you say they tease the mind.
They do.
Well, they tease the mind because it is what you want it to be.
Yes, in a sort, there's a kind of a wide range of associations that you can bring to them. Some of them might look like the deep space of the cosmos. Others kind of look like crystals or neural patterns. Others look like, as you mentioned, the undersea life. So they have a kind of a freewheeling range of associations rather than just a one thing. And that's why I call them worldscapes.
You know why I like them? I'll tell you why. Because when I look at them, we're partners.
Yes. Yeah. I do not, when I make them for me. But I assume that other people will also be interested. And the associations are not so locked in that if you didn't get something, that was the only thing you had to think.
Well, that's right. And this one looks like maybe a bird caught in a net. I mean, it can be anything I want it to be. So that makes us partners, because what it is for you, you're not
It's very
telling me
web-like.
that it has to be the same for me.
Right. And obviously it can't be anything. I'm not talking about gender or identity in these. But there is certainly a very wide range of associations that I want people to have, that they really bring something to it when they view the work.
But they bring something to it, but they also get something from it.
Yes, which is nice.
Yeah, it's very
nice. It's reciprocal, yeah.
Yes, and that's why I think it's so nice. And you said it teases the mind and beguiles the eye. And that's exactly what it does. But I think I'm going to suggest to you that it does one other thing.
What's that?
It stretches the mind.
Oh, that's a nice thing. Yeah.
I think it does.
Yeah. Well, I think it enables us to think different ways about photography, which I think is quite useful. And when people come in and look at these, I think the scale of the work is quite interesting because they're large.
They're big.
Nearly 4 by 5 feet.
Yes, they're big.
And that was intentional. I want there to be a physical presence to the work, so that you really do feel as if you're in another world when you're viewing them.
But they are large, and that was a kind of an interesting thing for me, because I was expecting something that maybe you could put in your house, but you have to have a pretty big house to have a 4 by 5 image in it, and I think that's the other thing that I found kind of interesting. Often photography is 10 by 12 or 11 by 18 or something, and people buy it and they hang it in their home, but this is
fairly big wall size.
Well, it's for galleries, and it's to show, and it's for groups of people to come in and enjoy. So to me, there is a real string attached to the photography as a real art form, a gallery art form, and to me that's kind of interesting.
Well, I think they fool people. Sometimes people might think that they're paintings, but the surface is quite seamless, so you would begin to pick up clues that, well, wait a minute, where's the paint? And to look, if you're
Mary's hiding something.
That's right, you're hiding something. Yeah. That's right.
That's interesting. It really is. And I know that you talk about them being fluid and intimate. Kind of relate that idea to life today, can you?
Well, the images, I think, have a certain dynamism to them. I think they're like shape-shifting. I call it what I might call punctuated equilibrium. It's as if everything in the world is moving all the time and changing.
And it is.
And these are like a slice of time that you see at this particular moment frozen. And so they really do embody a sense of time and movement, as if the very next second everything would shift again and create another form.
Well, and if you look at the array of the images, it underscores that. Yes. Because they're all different forms, they're different colors, bright pink, and the colors are bright.
Very.
Did you ever think about muting the colors?
Oh, I have some that are more muted, and there are passages within each work that you have some that are, obviously quite very bright aquas and blues, and you might see a kind of a sharp orange and red, but then you might find passages that are a little bit murky, like sea green, where you don't have quite as much color, and there are darker passages where you might see different forms.
But life today is kind of in your face.
Yes.
It's bright, and it's fluid, and it's volatile, and it's noisy. And I always think that artists, the eye of the artist is an eye of the soul of the people. I really do. And I think that what comes out in the creative attempts of the artist shows life today. It's today.
Oh yeah, I think artists obviously pull in from all around them, and it's not a direct one-to-one. I think you pull in things from everything you read, see, hear about, and then it comes out in the art, not necessarily as a, event A caused picture A.
Exactly.
But it's more like if you think of it as a great mulch theory, everything kind of goes together and then gets reformed in the artwork.
You just keep making sausage, Mary.
That's right. Well, probably do a better job than Congress.
Yes.
We hope.
That's right. Now, you have a lot of students.
I do.
Let's talk about your students. I have, do they try to recreate what you do?
No.
How do you handle that?
Well, first of all, we're teaching a course that is lens-based. So it is photography with a camera, and I teach a film-based introductory course. So it's black and white and in the dark room. Now, I start off with the photogram because it's one of the oldest of photographic processes. So I do show them what that is, and then at the end of the term, they make one in black and white. But I deliberately do not do my work for them.
Do they see yours?
Not really until, when I do a tour of the GEB building with in the photo collection, they'll see a piece there, but I really don't go through my work per se.
Well, I read someplace that a good art teacher, I don't know where I read it, a good art teacher has students that do not emulate the teacher. In other words, a good art teacher inspires creativity and differences of artistic effort in the students.
Well, students need to find their own voice. They can't find my voice.
But the teacher has to help them do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We start off with different exercises, just something as simple as, when you take a picture, you forget that it's the kind of lens, the kind of lighting, where you are. Do you always hold the camera in horizontal mode? Do you ever get down low or up high? So there's so many decisions that go into a normal lens-based picture that people just don't think about. And when you begin to have those as parts of assignments, then you realize all of the creative controls at your disposal. So we do that in the class.
You say, hey, I can do that a different way.
Absolutely.
But what you're doing, it seems to me, what I hear you saying is that before they can burst out in a fountain of creative thought, they have to learn the basics of the skill.
Yes. I think it's like anything. If you're playing piano, very few of us can go up to a piano keyboard and immediately play something. We have to learn the notes, we have to learn the scale, we have to learn, just basic composition. And the same is true with photography. We want to start off with the basics of light. That is the key element in photography, and so that's where we start, and then composition and other elements of form. But they have a variety of assignments that kind of open up ideas to them. The other thing is that photography is about so many different things. You have to realize that there's scientific photography, commercial photography, journalism, essay, kind of photo documentary work, artistic work.
The photo documentary work is becoming more and more visible.
Yes, it is. And students, we're an image culture. We have a glut of images that we are surrounded by. And so the course is not just about how do I make a picture, but how do I read a picture? How do I understand what an advertiser is trying to do when they make an image in a certain way?
But I think this is an important thread that needs to be pulled out. And there are many, many people out there that are for fun photographers.
Sure.
But there are a number of very fine professions within the rubric of photography.
Yes.
And I think that perhaps is what the college does best. Besides teaching the basics, it presents to the student a menu.
Options, yes.
And options.
Yeah, there are many particular paths to go with photography. everything from a photojournalist to someone who might want to work in the forensic field, the medical field. Certainly, you can think of Hubble telescopes, the scientific element of photography. So, people have a lot of options open to them.
Have your students picked from those options for the most part, or
Well,
do they
we're
usually
seeing,
go in one track?
Remember, I'm seeing Photo 1 people, so I'm not going to be at that level with them to know where they're going with it. But a lot of times we have graphic design folks who are interested in that end of things because it's such a key element to their work. And then we'll have students who transfer to other programs for documentary work and so forth to finish their degree.
So you give them the platform.
Well, they get the beginning, yes.
From which to spring forward.
Absolutely. It's a good thing.
Well, you talk about the art as rising, falling, drifting, unfettered, and then there is a violent and explosive tenor and primal collision. Discuss, I'm always interested in the thinking, what goes through your mind when you create a photogram. What are you thinking?
I want to make something that has a sense of volatility and contingency. I think most of my work deals with the idea of what it is to be human, and I want to have a work that people can really grab onto and look at, not just once, but many times.
But this image could be anything. It could be a deep sea dragon, it could be a wolf, it could be a blob, it could be anything.
Well, I don't see that as a problem.
I don't either.
Yeah, I think it's...
I see that as a partnership.
Yes. And I think it's, kind of it's fascinating when you kind of look at these. I think one of the things that this particular body of work does is that it really captures a sense of three-dimensional space. Often we think of photographs as really being two-dimensional.
Well, yours are three-dimensional.
But they have it has a very definite sense of the sculptural.
Which I think is an interesting point to bring out, because we're talking about an image on a flat piece of paper.
Correct.
And
it has a sense of depth to it.
It does. Was that accidental, or is that
Well, it's been a process I've been working on for a number of years, so in terms of, it's simply a development where I start and how I wind up. I mean, it's incremental. I think everyone's, development as an artist there's a kind of a generalized logic, but really that's a logic in retrospect. You kind of do things intuitively, incrementally, and you try things out and you test them, just the way a scientist would test things out. What works, what doesn't work. So, where can I go with this?
And that's interesting too, because you have, with your photograms, you have evolved as an artist. How long have you been doing these?
Well, probably well over 10 years at this point.
Well, then you have evolved quite a bit as an artist in that 10 years, always thinking how you can do it better.
I think that's what artists do. You want to be in a subject matter that you don't quite understand, and you try to understand it through the art. So you're always kind of in this realm of uncertainty, and I think that's just part and parcel of being an artist. That's where you kind of reside in this kind of
to live in
tricky,
the realm of uncertainty.
Yeah, to be in this kind of little tricky space. There's a wonderful quote that says, you'd rather wear a path by walking it rather than walk a well-worn path, and I think that's correct. I think you want to try things out and see where you can go. And that's important for students to realize, that even though sometimes they'll say, well, that's all been done before, and then I'll say to them, but you haven't done it, and which means you have not brought yourself to it, which the picture will be different because you're doing it. And you learn from the past. I mean, the past leads you to the future.
We stand on the shoulders of giants.
We do, but you have to start somewhere.
That's right, that's right. Well, Bruce Hartman, who's the director of the Nerman Gallery, said that you have blurred the boundary between photography and painting.
They have kind of an interesting look that way, I think, because when we think of photographs, we usually think of the representation of reality, a picture through a lens, where if I take your picture, I see you. You may be in
you take a tree, you get a tree.
I get a tree. But we also forget that in that snapping of the picture, I've made a number of decisions. Did I use a close-up lens or a wide lens? Was it foggy, misty light, or was it bright sunlight? So, even something as maybe someone might regard that as trivial, it's very important, those decisions. I'm just pushing it a little bit further, where there is not an it that the image refers to, because they're all created in the darkroom.
The star said, and I think this is kind of an interesting, and I think this work illustrates it. The star said that your use of gesture ties the works to abstract expressionism.
Mm-hmm.
The forms relate to the modernist tradition of biomorphic abstraction. Let's talk about, what is biomorphic abstraction?
Well, biomorphic would be kind of, morphing would be a changing, and bio refer to kind of a biological sense of things always constantly moving. In other words, not being static or not being mechanistic. And I think they do have that appeal to them. Although in certain works you can see lines and so forth that I think point the viewer to the sense of data. So it's a little bit, kind of a little bit like computer imagery in that sense. So they kind of tease the mind that way too. It's not strictly biological, but it's not strictly mechanical or data oriented.
Well, when I read that, and having seen your images, I thought of an amoeba.
Yes.
That is constantly changing shape, and you look at it one time and it looks like this, you look at it another time and it looks like something else. So I think that, to me, that's what I see in, it's constant.
Well, I think there's this constant kind of fluidity and movement in the images, and they do, rather than my past work dealt more with color, this really does deal a lot more with form and motion, and kind of like arrested motion, kind of like it's stopped now, but any moment now it might reconvene and change again.
Explode.
Yes, and they are tumultuous. I mean, they are kind of riotous in that sense.
See, but I think that's sort of
it's convulsive.
Because you're not that kind of person.
No.
Or at least I don't see you as that kind of person.
Well, we can be many things, can't we?
Yes. So I think that's sort of interesting, because you're kind of a quiet, subdued kind of person, or that's the image that you present to me. And yet what you produce is anything but that.
Well, when you're in the darkroom, you're in kind of the realm of alchemical magic, and I think that sense of being able to create what you can for the viewer, I don't really have to worry about anything else. I just kind of use various things and come up with ideas and test them out for myself, and I normally assume that other people will also be interested.
But the one thing that you cannot do
Yes.
is do it over like a painter can.
No, I cannot make a duplicate, only by scanning the image, which these are.
So could you?
Oh yes, we can make these at different sizes.
Yes.
Yes, they've been
But you
digitized.
can't change the.
No, the composition.
Yeah.
Once you've made the composition and it's come out, then that's what there is.
What you seize is what you get.
You're not going to have a yes. You
That's
can't go
right.
back. Can't
No.
erase.
No. And so that's kind of an interesting concept too. And I think sometimes that
You're like an
reflects-
editor.
Well, that's right, but that reflects life.
Yes.
Often we
can't go back.
We cannot go back, and we can't do it over. So what I see in your art is really a reflection in so many ways of life.
We have a very busy culture. We're inundated all the time with messages, various media grabbing for our attention. So for me, closing the darkroom door is it is like entering another world. But I reflect in that process what's around me.
Isn't that wonderful?
But everyone reflects it differently. You could have an artist who is just as
that's
bombarded, but comes up with something a lot more still.
Well, that's right, but that's art.
But that's art.
And art speaks differently
goes through
to
the
each
person.
person that views it. I think that's wonderful. Do you ever throw anything out that didn't turn out to your
sure.
satisfaction?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Well, do you keep most of it? Or?
I keep most of things because sometimes, it's the way you look at something at a particular time, your preconceptions in your mind. You can create, say, 6 or 7 different images and one day think, I didn't really do very well this day. And come back a week later and think, maybe that's interesting. I'll see if I can pick up the thread of that idea. So I think it's like when someone writes a text, I think you go through a variety of revisions.
In other words, even in the ones that are not keepers, as they say, there may be something in it.
Oh yeah,
that
glimmer
you
of
would
something.
Like to, yeah.
Sometimes a work can be a intermediary step to something else that might happen later, and it's nice to have that because you're not always quite sure where it's going.
But, you know, everything is a circle. We're back now to the concept of the evolution of an artist's work.
Yes.
See? So I think that's, what about photography attracts you? Why were you attracted to photography?
It's a very direct medium. I like the fact that you can work in different ways. You know, you can take a picture, develop the film, see your results, go and take another one. And in my case, dealing with photograms, I can make an image and see them and then kind of completely do something else. So it's a very physical, direct medium, and I like that part of it. It also has a, you know, there's a photographer, Walker Evans, the wonderful photographer, said reality is not totally real. And I think he's absolutely correct there. Photography is I think, a very slippery medium. We think we know what it is, but we often don't. We often forget that we are representing reality. When Ansel Adams...
Take that to his life.
Well, it is. When Ansel Adams takes a picture, if the sky is black, the sky wasn't black. He made it that way. But we don't think about that when we look at it. We think, oh, there's half dome. We just see the picture. But we forget about all the creative elements that he brought to it. And so when we take pictures, we're constantly having to decide. And I think this just kind of accentuates that decision-making process.
Well, don't you think, too, that particularly in photography, we think of the machine.
We do.
The lens. But we forget that the eye of the artist is behind all that.
Well, the hand's connected to the mind and to the eye, and so that little machine is always connected to the thinking brain, one way or another, either
Hopefully
intuitively.
The thinking one.
Yes, intuitively. But you know, it's I think it is a nice distinction. My work is quite physical. You know, it's sloppy. It's somewhat inelegant when you're kind of working with liquids and paper and drawing.
An apron.
Absolutely. I just put on my work clothes and get in there and do stuff.
So what's next for you? Are you going to stay with photograms for the
I like photograms. I've kind of gotten interested in doing some of these maybe in some video form. When I gave the talk, I had put some of these to motion, and I liked that idea, and that seemed to be a kind of an interesting direction. And, you know, I'll always try something in the darkroom that will up the ante, so to speak. You know, you kind of have something where, okay, what if I do this? You know, I like those what if, and it's an interesting, those words lead us to many places, and I think they're good places to go. And you can try it out, see what happens, and then I go from there. So I have a couple of projects underway. One's lens-based, and the other one kind of deals with liquids, but in a different way.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
but
it's fun.
Again, you are always examining the possibilities.
My background is not in the arts. I have a degree in philosophy and sociology, and so I kind of think of it as philosophy is the sense of how we think about things. What's the idea of justice? What's the idea of a good life? Sociology is what we actually do in life. And so that combination for me works in the arts because I like to think about what can I do with something? What can I make the camera do? What can I make the materials of the darkroom do? And I don't think of them as being set as I don't think of them as being formulaic. I don't like to think of it as having a recipe. I just like to think of it as, okay, what can I do now?
Well, a recipe puts you in a box.
Yes, it does. It limits you, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Los Angeles art critic, his name is David Pagel, he said he hails your works
That was nice.
as a universe of potential. And that's really what we're talking about. And isn't that...
Oh, I love the idea of the cosmos. The whole idea of
Yeah.
space is fascinating. And time, the sense of it going on and on, you know, just that sense of infinity. It's just a fascinating idea. And they are like little universes. Each one, I think, presents a different world.
But isn't that what life is all about?
Indeed it is.
It is. And I think that as I have had the privilege of viewing your magic, I think that it's also been a real treat for all of us in our community to meet you, Mary Wessel, and to know that Johnson County Community College is fortunate enough to have you.
Well, it's
to
a nice place to teach.
It is. It's a wonderful place to teach and a wonderful place to enjoy as a member of our community.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mary Wessel, and thank you for being with us. I'm Mary Davidson, and it's Our Community.